So, depending on what band performs metalcore, it can either become that band's own unique thing, or they run the risk of being lumped in with other bands that perform the genre. In a time when I was getting into more metalcore, mostly thanks to Last.fm, look, there they are again, Demon Hunter was one of those bands that just randomly appeared from nowhere, and at first I wasn't fully sure how to feel about them, but the more songs I heard, the more I looked them up, and the more I actually grew to like them. They hail from Seattle, Washington, and have been around since 2000, so they're almost 20 years old, and yes, the band does have Christian members, but as I pointed out in my Skillet two-part episode, I prefer to put their religion aside and really only bring up if I deem it necessary. If that's the case, I wonder just how many times I'll be bringing up for this one. Anyway, it's time for another two-part backtracking episode, and this time it's Demon Hunter. So, we begin with Demon Hunter's self-titled debut. Released in 2002 through Solid State Records and produced by Aaron Sprinkle, it's a really good start for the band in all honesty. I will get this out of the way very quickly though. Solid State is essentially the band's home, and yes, Aaron does produce all of the band's albums but always on his own, but I'll get to that later. It's weird to think how small the band started off. They only had 3 members at the time, and the albums that show us are just under 39 minutes long with a total of 10 tracks, one of those and The Sky Went Red being a really cool 30-second long clip of horses riding and rain falling, possibly indicating the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. As for the members which I mentioned, those would be the band's only remaining member today and lead vocalist Ryan Clark, who played guitar on the debut, bassist Don Clark, Ryan's older brother, and drummer Jesse Sprinkle, Aaron's younger brother, a family affair. The band weren't given a lot of time to record the album either, having only really 3 months to record it between June and August of 2002 before it was finally dropped in October. Despite this small start and the setback with the limited recording time, the band actually put out a really good solid first album. There's some industrial elements to it which spice things up here and there, and mixing it with the band's own styles at the time was pretty unheard of. Well, it is from what I've seen and heard at least. The album is a good testament to how much better the band would soon become, as they squeeze in some pretty memorable tracks into the short time frame that they're given. Mixing their usual metalcore and nu with industrial elements just sounds cool, and it's just proof of the pudding of how much of a dab hand Aaron Sprinkle is as a producer, especially when you consider his work with other awesome bands such as Nine Lashes, Project A6, and 1000 Foot Crutch. Now, there is some double-track stuff here and there which actually sounds pretty good, making Ryan's vocals sound like he's screaming against the background of him singing and vice versa. Speaking of which, Ryan Clark's vocal performance is pretty good on their debut, mixing screams and singing well with enough cohesiveness that I actually understand what he's saying and screaming, with his lyrics about faith, his belief in God, and sometimes lack thereof showing themselves readily throughout the album. His guitar work isn't bad either, and he lands some good solos and riffs here and there. Don's bass work is pretty good, adding some good scales of his own, and Jesse's drumming keeps up well with the other instruments, offering fast-paced work on the snare cymbal and the great double bass timing with the breakdowns. Standout songs include Screams of the Undead, Turn Your Back and Run, Infected, A Broken Upper Hand, and my favourite, In My Throat is an Open Grave. Awesome song titles there to go with an awesome debut from an awesome band. I can certainly recommend this one. It's really good. We then carry on with their second album, Summer of Darkness. Released in 2004, it's another really good effort from the band, and it embraces their signature sound a little bit more, adding more styles of their current metal sound as we know it. The production value compared to the first one is skyrocketed, with Aaron Sprinkle adding some really good elements here and there. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, we actually have a full lineup for this one. Awesome. Ryan Clark switches to being only a lead vocalist, his brother Don moves from bass to rhythm guitar, with John Dunn stepping in on bass. Chris McAdam becomes the lead guitarist, and Jesse Sprinkle is the only member without any changes as he stays behind the kit once again. Another change is that this is the first album to feature guest members, so let's get those out of the way quickly. Trevor McNaven from 1000 Foot Crutch appears on the track Coffin Builder, Brock Linder from 36 Crazy Fists appears on the song Beauty Through the Eyes of a Predator, Mike Williams of the Agony Scene appears on Beheaded, and lastly Howard Jones, formerly of Killswitch Engage and Bloods Have Been Shed, currently of Devil You Know, appears on the song Our Faces Fall Apart. Also, the album is the band's longest at 55 minutes long. With that out of the way, let's move on. As I mentioned earlier, it's a good follow-on from their debut, but there are a few places where it just falls a bit short, personally for me. Not much, I'll explain. See, the lyrics, whilst coherent and well-written, do get a little bit repetitive for me. See, the band finding... with the band finding their core sound on this album, they also start putting out longer songs, hence a longer album. Those longer songs unfortunately have a nice habit of repeating a certain phrase, bridge, or chorus from time to time, mostly to close the song out. It's something that they would dabble in on later albums, and I do kind of like that it's done early on to establish it as a habit, but it's done a little bit too much on this one. Also, there's no guitar solo, so what the fuck is up with that? I mean, the instrumental work is good and the breakdowns actually sound really awesome to close out the songs with the repetitive lyrics and whatnot, but it needed some really good guitar solos and licks to just hold everything together. Also, a little side note, going from drop C to drop B tuning actually helped a little bit as well with the sound to make things heavier. But despite the negative things that I just said, slightly negative, this is still a really good album and it's far from their worst. It does have a little case of sequel jitters, but it does what it needs to do. Ryan's vocal work is great with the added effects on his voice turned up even further to help emphasize his messages. There are good riffs from McCadden and Don Clark, despite the lack of solos. John's bass work shows off greatly, adding a good groove and chuck to the breakdowns and bridges, and Jesse's drumming is still tight, adding good timing and rhythm. Standout songs include the title track, Beheaded, My Heartstrings Come Undone, I Play Dead, and my favourite in Beauty Through the Eyes of a Predator. Despite its setback, Summer of Darkness is a really good album, just a bit below their debut but still good. I can't recommend it, albeit a little cautiously. Not much, a little bit. Still good. Let's keep this metaphorical train on the metaphorical tracks with their third album, The Triptych. Released in 2005, not 2015, it's another one of those cases where despite it being only a year and a half since their last album, it sounds really damn good. And it pretty much is a year and a half actually. May 2005's Summer of Darkness, when compared to October of 2006 for the Triptych, is not a huge margin, and other bands have put out albums in less time than that, often for much better or similar results. This is another such case. But before I get into that, let's get through some facts. First of all, the word triptych might sound weird, but it's actually got a real cool meaning. It's basically another way of saying three separate pieces of artwork, this includes music as well, are all put together to form one bigger piece. This meaning shows when you consider that the band had three ideas for the album's cover, settling on the orange and red variation of their logo with a red snake. Other designs were a black spider logo and a logo that looked like a tree with crows around it, with the last one being my personal favourite of the bunch. You know, it was really, really cool seeing all the crows and stuff. By the by, those last two are alternate covers, so if you don't get the main one, you might get one of the others. Also, the special edition of the album has a cover that mixes those three all together in one. It's pretty cool and lives up to the Triptych name. Alas, I listened to the box standard edition as I always do, and that's a good thing because the standard edition is long enough at just over 51 minutes, whereas the special edition clocks in at almost an hour and 10 minutes, and I ain't got much dedication to the show for that. Also, there are some lineup changes. Ryan, Don, and John all stay on, and they're joined by new lead guitarist Ethan Luck and new drummer Timothy Watts, aka Yogi. Another factor is the microphone. I personally thought that this was cool enough to include, and I swear that's not to drag it out at all. So, for the first two albums, Ryan Clark used a standard recording microphone which allowed him to move to... Oh, hang on. He used a standard recording microphone with the screen behind it. I skipped a line by accident. For the first two albums. In the case of the Triptych, he uses a basic handheld mic which allowed him to move about as he pleased, along with covering the mic with his hands to make his voice sound distant or muffled. It's certainly going to make things easier on the producers when you can create half of the vocal effects for yourself. And that's just a badass little thing that I wanted to share with you all because I thought it was cool. Back to the regular stuff. The band finds more melody on this album, with Ryan's clean singing coming leaps and bounds, and the added vocal effects actually making it sound more like there's backing vocalists and not just Ryan being double-tracked. His lyrics open up more in his personal feelings towards God as well, and he can still scream with the best of them. Ethan and Timothy make welcome new additions, with Ethan having some good solos and breakdowns, and Yogi having some awesome drumming. He hits hard behind the kit, and I just love that. John and Don also both play it well, with the former adding some cool bass lines and riffs, and the latter lending a good choking riff or two here and there of his own. Standout songs include Undying, Not I, The Science of Lies, their cover of Prong's Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck, and my favourite In the Soldier song. The Triptych is a well-balanced, well-written and well-produced album, and it's possibly Demon Hunter's most accessible work. I can certainly and safely recommend this one. It's really good if you're gonna start getting into the band. This is the album to start with that, trust me. Next up, we reach their last album for part 1 of the episode in their fourth studio release, Storm the Gates of Hell. God, that's a cool title. Released in 2007, there really isn't much to talk about in terms of changes, but regular viewers of the series will know that I'll try and drag it out anyways, which, like I said, I wouldn't do when I was talking about the Triptych. Sorry. Firstly is the fact that there's no lineup changes and all band members keep to the instruments that they stood behind on the Triptych. The only real change kind of comes in the form of who's behind the booth. Aaron Sprinkle, as I mentioned during the self-titled debut album, stays on, but is joined by an extra pair of hands in a dude named Sean Lopez. It's a pretty potent pairing when it comes to their production, and that's possibly apparent to the album's runtime, which is only 8 seconds shorter than the triptych. There is a slight change in sound as well, adding more guitar solos, more effects, two-set guitars, and the other instruments in general, and focusing more on a classic metalcore style with more clean vocals than we'd had before from the band up until this point. Speaking of vocals, we actually have another guest appearance. Yay! It's only the one this time, as Bruce Fitzhugh, I hope I'm saying that surname right, of Living Sacrifice appears on the track 16. He does a pretty good job and has some awesome sounding screams, and I might need to get into more Living Sacrifice, maybe I'll do an episode on them. Anyway, moving on. I did mention that there are some changes to the sound. What I failed to mention is that they drop most of the nu metal stuff by this point, and they strike a really good balance. There's a much faster pace of the instrumental work that's absolutely dizzying to keep up with, but it's fun, and then when it gets to the choruses and their clean vocals, it doesn't really take away from that fast-paced intensity. Not an easy thing to pull off, but you have to remember that this was Demon Hunter's fourth album. They needed to change things up a bit after striking gold in terms of finding the sound on the triptych, and a Storm the Gates of Hell as a result, then I'm really happy with it. Along with their producing chops, Aaron and Sean actually help along with keyboards and theremin respectively, and some additional guitars too, which adds a really cool effect and gives the album this great fluidity to it. There are very few times where one song doesn't just go right into another and it sounds really amazing. Going back to the guitar work, they start utilising some tap notes, specifically on the solos of the album, and it rolls right into their wheelhouse, and it just sounds great. Ryan Clark gives his most balanced vocal performance here, I think, mixing his screams and singing well with his message of faith, hope and forgiveness still burning strong. The guitar work is still stellar, and it truly finds a really good place to fit in here, with Ethan and Tom both working well behind their axes. Yogi is brilliant as always behind the drum, showing great pattern and technique behind the kit, adding a vicious and technical double bass attack to the main breakdowns, and John Dunn's bass works just steps up a bit as well, giving great riffs and a deep groove to keep things going. Standout songs include the introductory title track, Fiction Kingdom, Lead Us Home, The Great Closer and The Wrath of God, and my favourite, In the Thread of Light. Storm the Gates of Hell is the band's best produced work, sure, but it doesn't overdo it and doesn't lose any of the band's signature intensity or integrity. I can safely recommend this one. So that'll just about do it for part 1. Join me tomorrow for part 2, where I'll be covering the last 4 albums from The World Is the Thorn to their 2017 8th album, Outlive. They don't have 27 albums out. I'll see you all then, and thank you for listening.